It was a cold November morning when Ethan Matthews, a promising young engineer, set off for his usual commute. The sun had barely risen, casting a pale orange hue over the sleepy suburban streets of Denver, Colorado. Ethan had always been the type to take life head-on, never one to hesitate or shy away from a challenge. Little did he know, this ordinary morning would soon turn into the most extraordinary test of his willpower and his life. Ethan had a successful career, a loving fiancée named Emma, and a close-knit group of friends. He had big dreams, ones that revolved around building a sustainable future for the world through clean energy. He loved his job at the tech startup, working long hours to develop cutting-edge solutions. His life was on an upward trajectory, and everything seemed perfect. But on that fateful day, everything changed. Ethan was driving his silver sedan, the radio playing softly in the background, when suddenly, his world turned upside down. A truck, speeding through a red light, collided with his car. The impact was devastating. His vehicle was crumpled like a tin can, and the sounds of metal grinding against metal echoed in the air as if the universe itself had taken a deep breath and held it. When emergency responders arrived at the scene, Ethan was unconscious, pinned inside the wreckage. Blood pooled on the driver's seat, and the paramedics immediately started working on him. His vital signs were faint, his breathing shallow. He was rushed to the nearest hospital, but his prognosis was grim. His fiancée, Emma, received the call shortly after. She had been at work, preparing for a big presentation at her law firm, when her phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm but urgent, informing her that Ethan had been in a serious car accident and was being rushed to the ER. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't even have time to process the words before she was out the door, her mind racing with worry and fear. When Emma arrived at the hospital, she was met by the cold, sterile atmosphere of the emergency room. The waiting area was filled with hushed voices and the soft beeping of machines, but none of that registered to her. All that mattered was Ethan. She was escorted to his room, where doctors were doing everything they could to stabilize him. The doctors gave her the news: Ethan had suffered a severe head injury. The trauma had caused significant damage to his brain, and there was nothing more they could do. The next 24 hours would be critical. Emma's world, already shattered by the accident, felt like it was slipping through her fingers. The doctors told her that, if Ethan didn't show any improvement in the next day, they would have to declare him brain dead. It was a blow she had never anticipated. She sat by his side, holding his hand, willing him to wake up. She spoke to him softly, telling him everything would be okay, that they had a future together, that she loved him more than anything in the world. The hours dragged on, but there was no change. No sign of life from Ethan. His vitals remained stable, but his brain activity was non-existent. The doctors were kind, but their words were blunt. "He's not going to wake up," they said. "It's time to prepare for the worst." The next morning, after the mandatory 24-hour observation period, the doctors came to Emma with the final decision. Ethan had not shown any signs of brain activity, and his brain function was irreversible. He had been declared brain dead. Emma's heart broke. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Ethan, the man she had planned to spend the rest of her life with, was gone. The love of her life, reduced to a lifeless body in a hospital bed. They had never even gotten the chance to say goodbye. But in the deepest recesses of her grief, Emma felt something stir. It was a small whisper, a glimmer of hope, buried beneath the overwhelming sorrow. She refused to give up on him just yet. She wasn't ready to say goodbye. Emma sat in the sterile hospital room, her hand gently resting on Ethan's, feeling the faint pulse beneath his skin. It was hard to fathom that he was truly gone, that the man who had once filled every moment of her life with laughter, love, and excitement was now just still. His face, usually so expressive and full of life, now seemed distant, a mere shell of who he had been. The doctors had given her the news with clinical detachment. "There's nothing more we can do," they had said. "We can keep him on life support, but his brain activity has ceased. He's declared brain dead." But Emma wasn't ready to accept it. Not yet. She looked at the machines surrounding him. The ventilator, the heart monitor, the 4-drip, everything that was keeping his body functioning, but nothing could revive what truly mattered. His mind. His soul. A thought crossed her mind that she hadn't dared entertain earlier, in the midst of the shock and disbelief. What if, just maybe, the doctors were wrong? What if there was still a chance? She had read about cases where people, declared brain dead, had inexplicably woken up. She had heard the stories of medical miracles. They were rare, sure, but they existed. It was a slim hope, but it was something. She reached out to Ethan's face, brushing the hair from his forehead, her touch tender, almost desperate. "Please, Ethan," she whispered, choking back tears. "Please come back to me." Hours turned into days. Emma refused to leave his side, not even to sleep. Her friends, family, and co-workers urged her to take a break, to get some rest, but she couldn't bring herself to leave him, not while there was even the smallest sliver of hope. She pored over medical journals, searched online, read stories of near miraculous recoveries. She came across a case of a young man, similar to Ethan, who had been declared brain dead after a motorcycle accident, only to awaken 3 days later, as if nothing had happened. The thought both terrified and intrigued Emma. Could that happen to Ethan? Could he wake up? Could he somehow defy the odds, come back from the brink of death, and return to her? One night, as the hospital was quiet, Emma sat by his bedside, her head resting on the arm of the chair, exhausted but unwilling to leave. She held on to a fragile hope that he could hear her, even in his state. She spoke to him softly, recounting memories of their time together. The way they had met in college, his goofy sense of humor, the road trips they had taken together, the plans they had made for the future. She talked about their wedding plans. They had been planning an outdoor wedding for the following summer, complete with a reception under the stars. It had all seemed so real, so certain. She imagined how beautiful it would be, the two of them exchanging vows in front of their family and friends. Now, it all seemed like a distant dream, a cruel mirage fading in the heat of her grief. "I don't know if you can hear me, Ethan, but I need you to know that I love you. I always have, and I always will," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "If you can come back to me, I'll wait forever." She kissed his forehead, a gesture she hadn't done in what felt like forever. The soft touch of her lips against his cool skin was the only thing that grounded her in that moment, reminding her that he was still there, somewhere, even if it was just his body. Emma sat in the quiet, not expecting anything to happen. But then, something did. It started as a faint flicker. The heart monitor, which had been steady and unwavering, began to show a slight irregularity. A slow, rhythmic beat. Emma's heart skipped a beat as she stared at the screen, wide-eyed. She leaned in closer, her breath catching in her throat. Could it be? She grabbed the nearby nurse call button, her fingers trembling. "Nurse! Nurse!" she called out, her voice cracking with panic and hope. A moment later, the door to the room opened, and a nurse rushed in, her expression shifting from concern to confusion as she looked at the monitor. "What's happening?" Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. The nurse checked the readings on the monitor. "It looks like there's a slight increase in heart rate," she said, almost as if she didn't believe it herself. "Let me check with the doctor." Emma's heart raced in her chest. Was this it? Was Ethan starting to come back? Minutes later, a doctor arrived, followed by a team of specialists. They observed Ethan, performing routine tests, checking for any signs of improvement. The doctor, Dr. Mitchell, was calm but focused. He placed a hand on Emma's shoulder, offering a small, reassuring smile. "We've seen cases like this before. The brain can sometimes show faint signs of activity after being thought to be completely non-functional. It's too early to tell if this is a true recovery, but we'll need to monitor him closely." Emma felt a wave of cautious optimism flood through her. She wasn't ready to celebrate, but this was the first sign of hope in days. Ethan's heart rate was rising slowly but steadily. His breathing, though still assisted by the ventilator, seemed to stabilize just a bit more. She held on to that glimmer of hope, refusing to let it go. Don't give up on him, she whispered to herself. Don't give up, Ethan. Please. The days that followed Ethan's faint signs of improvement were a whirlwind of tension and hope. Emma, once emotionally drained, found herself clinging to the smallest of changes, any flicker of life, as if they were the most important signals the world could offer. Each time she visited him, she meticulously watched the machines, observing any shift in his vitals, no matter how slight. Her eyes never left the heart monitor, her ears never missed the faintest variation in the rhythmic beat that had once seemed so sterile, but now felt like the most precious sound. The doctors were cautious but encouraged. Dr. Mitchell had told her that sometimes, the brain could show subtle signs of activity after being declared brain dead, especially in the case of severe trauma. They had been hesitant to offer any guarantees, but Emma didn't need guarantees anymore. She had her own quiet, unwavering belief. Ethan was fighting. He was coming back. And with every passing hour, Emma's optimism grew, though she still couldn't bring herself to fully let go of the fear that, at any moment, the doctors would give her bad news. The waiting was agonizing. Every time a nurse came into the room, her heart raced, wondering if it would be the moment they would tell her things had taken a turn for the worse. But every time, she was met with cautious nods and quiet reassurances. The miracle was happening in slow motion. Ethan's vitals continued to improve. His heart rate was becoming more regular. His blood pressure, which had once been dangerously low, was rising, even if just a little. But the real breakthrough came one morning, 3 days after his heart rate had first started to rise. Emma had come into the room, exhausted from lack of sleep but determined not to leave his side, when she noticed something different. His fingers twitched. It was so subtle at first that she thought she might have imagined it. But then it happened again. A slight movement, the kind that could be dismissed as a reflex, but to Emma, it was everything. She couldn't contain herself. She jumped to her feet, her voice trembling as she called for the nurse. Nurse! Nurse! His fingers moved. Did you see that? He moved. The nurse rushed into the room, checking Ethan's hand. She looked at the monitor again, her face lighting up with cautious excitement. It's possible, she said. It could be an involuntary response, but we'll let the doctor know. We need to monitor this closely. Emma barely heard the nurse's words. Her mind was racing. Could this be it? Could Ethan actually be starting to wake up? Was he fighting to return to her? The doctors were soon notified, and the team entered the room to observe. They performed tests, tapping his feet, his arms, gently trying to elicit a response. And then it happened. Another movement, this time more deliberate. His hand twitched again, this time in response to their stimulus. And then, as if the universe was giving her a sign, Ethan's eyelids fluttered. Emma's heart stopped in her chest. She leaned in closer, her breath coming in short gasps. Ethan, she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Ethan, can you hear me? For a moment, there was nothing. Then, ever so faintly, his lips moved. A barely audible sound, but enough to make Emma's heart soar. Emma, he whispered, his voice hoarse and weak, as if it had been years since he had spoken. Tears filled Emma's eyes. Ethan, oh my God, you're awake, she cried, her voice breaking with joy and relief. She reached out to him, her hand brushing his cheek. It was real. It was happening. Ethan was coming back. The doctors quickly moved into action, checking him over, confirming that the movements weren't just reflexes but actual responses. The monitors showed that Ethan's brain activity was increasing. The trajectory was still uncertain, but the fact that he had spoken, that he had shown awareness, was a monumental shift. It was a miracle in the making. As they continued to examine him, Ethan slowly regained more consciousness. His eyes fluttered open fully for the first time since the accident. He squinted at the bright hospital lights above him, his vision blurry at first. But then his gaze landed on Emma, and the faintest flicker of recognition passed through his eyes. Emma. He rasped again, his voice barely more than a whisper. Where am I? Emma, overwhelmed with emotion, could barely form words. She leaned down to kiss his forehead, a gentle touch that said everything she had been too afraid to say before. "You're in the hospital, Ethan," she replied softly. "You've been in an accident. But you're going to be okay. You're waking up, and we're going to get through this." Tears streamed down her face as she stroked his hair, laughing and crying at the same time. The relief was so intense, it was as if she had been holding her breath for days, and now, she could finally exhale. The doctors continued to observe, taking notes and performing their assessments. Dr. Mitchell, though still cautious, seemed hopeful. "This is incredible progress," he said. "I've never seen anything like this before. But we'll need to continue monitoring his brain function closely. We can't make any final conclusions just yet. We need to give it time." But Emma didn't care about time. She was no longer consumed by the crushing fear that had haunted her for the past several days. Ethan was back. He was talking. He was aware. And that was more than enough for her. Ethan's return to consciousness was nothing short of miraculous, but waking up was only the beginning. His body was weak, his muscles atrophied from days of inactivity, and his mind was struggling to process what had happened. He had lost time, days, possibly weeks, and the last thing he remembered was getting into his car that morning before everything went black. Emma sat beside him, her eyes filled with both relief and worry. "You were in an accident, Ethan," she explained gently, holding his hand. "You were declared brain dead, but you came back. You fought your way back." Ethan blinked slowly, his breathing shallow as the words sank in. Brain dead? He had been gone? It didn't make sense. His body ached, his mind felt sluggish, but deep within him, a faint ember of life burned. He was here. He was alive. Dr. Mitchell and his team ran more tests over the next few hours. Ethan's responses were slow but improving. He could squeeze Emma's hand when asked, move his fingers, even blink on command. His speech was barely above a whisper, but his awareness was increasing. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Mitchell admitted, his voice carrying a mix of excitement and disbelief. "We need to take this step by step. His brain has been through severe trauma. Recovery won't be immediate, but it's possible." Emma didn't need to hear the word possible to know what she already believed: Ethan was coming back. And she would be there for every step of his recovery. The next few days were grueling. Ethan had to relearn even the simplest things: how to sit up, how to move his fingers with intention, how to eat on his own. His muscles, weakened from the trauma, struggled to hold his weight. There were moments of frustration, moments when he wanted to give up, when he would look at Emma with tired, defeated eyes. "I don't know if I can do this," he murmured one evening as she helped him grip a spoon, his hands trembling from the effort. Emma placed her hand over his, steadying him. "You already did the impossible, Ethan," she whispered. "You came back. Now you just have to keep going." With every passing day, Ethan improved. His voice grew stronger, his movements more controlled. The medical staff was astounded. Cases like his were unheard of. Patients declared brain dead did not simply wake up, let alone start regaining function so quickly. But Ethan wasn't just another patient. He was a miracle in motion. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the day Ethan took his first steps. Emma stood beside him, her hands ready to catch him if he faltered. The physical therapist held on to his other side, encouraging him. Ethan's legs felt like lead, every step a battle against gravity itself. But then, with sheer determination, he moved. One foot forward. Then another. Tears welled in Emma's eyes. The doctors, the nurses, even the therapists watched in stunned silence. Ethan Matthews was walking. Weeks passed, and Ethan's progress was nothing short of extraordinary. He no longer needed machines to assist him, and his body, though still recovering, was becoming his own again. His mind, too, was sharpening. The memories of the accident were still missing, but everything else, his love for Emma, his passion for life, remained intact. The story of his recovery spread beyond the hospital. News stations wanted interviews. Medical professionals from across the country were studying his case, calling it the Matthews miracle. But Ethan didn't care about the media or the scientific discussions. The only thing that mattered was the life waiting for him outside these hospital walls. On the day of his discharge, Emma helped him pack his things, her smile never fading. "Are you ready?" she asked, squeezing his hand. Ethan looked around the room one last time. It was the place where he had been given a second chance, where he had fought his way back to life. But now, it was time to move forward. He turned to Emma, his voice steady and sure. "Let's go home." As they stepped outside, the sun warmed his skin, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Ethan felt truly alive. And this time, he wasn't going to take a single moment for granted.